All right, here we go. This is Jason Flame, and welcome to the Master Motivation Podcast. Today is Wednesday, September 28th, and I'm very excited for my guest today. And I'll introduce him now. His name is Brett Big Schwag Wagner, who has been in the entertainment business for over 30 years. Brett is well known in the U.S. and overseas for being the voice and fill-in host on the hit TV show Monster Garage with Jesse James for 95 episodes on the Discovery Channel. Brett also hosted 160 episodes of the drag racing show Pastime on Speed Channel. Brett Big Schwag Wagner has also made a living being an actor with over 100 credits in the TV and film world. He is known as the Lost Leatherface in the 2003 remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Jessica Biel. Other notable gigs include the voice and spokesperson for Bad Boy Mowers for 19 years and counting. He has also done a stint in pro wrestling where he worked with and discovered folks like Samoa Joe and John Cena. Welcome to the show, Big Schwag.
Man, that's a pretty big resume.
That sounds pretty good. I like it. Well, listen, I cannot start this show without telling a quick story, and I'd like to kind of tie in the connection in how we met. And I've probably told you this story on at least two different occasions, but as a young kid, number one, I grew up a huge fan of pro wrestling, right? I was always a martial artist. And so at about 22, 23, I started really thinking seriously. I'm like, man, I want to go to the WWE. I want to be a pro wrestler. So I remember at the time I was following Ultimate Pro Wrestling, and I saw an ad or something. It was in a magazine because I don't even know if we had internet back then, or at least social media as we do now. But I got an address and I wrote in. And when I wrote in, I got a response. And the person that I spoke to was yourself. And you're like, hey, come on down. This is when classes are. This is when we train. This is what we do. This is how much it is, blah, blah, blah. So I show up, and I remember the Ballard brothers were teaching class. And I walk in. I'm like, damn, this is super cool. And then I kind of looked at myself, and I looked at everybody else, and I looked at my friends. I'm like, I'm nowhere close to being ready for this. And I literally, it's one of the biggest regrets I ever had was that the instructor walks up and says, hey, you here to train? I said, nope, just here to watch. And I watched for about 15, 20 minutes and left. Flash forward 20 years almost. I run into someone, Barry Cohen, who introduced me to Paul Ventimiglia. And he says, hey, how would you like to promote your martial arts school? Come on down to this show at the Boys and Girls Club. We got a pro wrestling show once a month. Cool. Meet Paul. Introduces me to Steve Adkins. I start training, and the rest is history. That's how I got into professional wrestling. As a 38-year-old father of two with a business, so my priorities were totally different. Was not going to go to the WWE. That was long gone. But I did get to live my dream. And so I just always like to share that story because when I met you one time at MPW, I was like telling you the story, and you're looking at me like, whatever, dude. That's a cool story. I've heard a million of them, but it's just a cool tie-in. So I wanted to start with that story.
Yeah, for folks that don't understand the pro wrestling business, you and I both loved it, right? We are what we call marks. A mark is a super fan of the business, and I'm a mark for the business, always have been, which means I grew up watching it. I was a big fan of this stuff. So were you. At 35 years old, I think 30 years old, I had like a midlife crisis. I was an actor. I was just starting to do the voice for for Monster Garage. And a friend of mine, Rick Drazen, who was a bodybuilder, very famous bodybuilder back in the Arnold Schwarzenegger days. And he was doing some wrestling. And I said, Rick, and I've always been a guy that tries to do everything. I may not be in the best shape, which I never have been. I don't know why, just issues I have. But I said, I want to get into this business somehow. And Rick was, in his mid-50s wrestling still. And he said, come down with me. We're going to go to this. I'm going to wrestle tonight. This guy, Sylvester Turkai Bear, is one of the most giant people in the world I've ever seen in my life, and one of the most gentle guys in the world in the ring. He said, you can manage me. I said, all right. So we went down to Huntington Beach. It was called Ultimate Pro Wrestling. Rick twisted his ankle 30 seconds into the match, and 30 seconds into the match. So I ran in the ring with my clipboard and I hit Sylvester in the head. pretty good shot. And he just turned around and, made a lunge for me, and I ran out of the ring. But I figured that's the way you got to save the match. But that was my introduction to pro wrestling. And then later on, I would help run the school. We had a pro wrestling school. We were like the minor leagues. We were like single A for the WWF back in the day. And I mean, I don't remember meeting you, but I remember us talking about it a couple times. But that's fine. What would have been different? Things might have been way different for you if at that point, there's always a path for guys like you and me. There's a path in life, and things might have been totally different, and you wouldn't be where you are right now, which is a successful business guy. You got a great family, you got businesses, and you might not be in this place, and you still got to 15 years, 20 years later, be able to live your dream.
Absolutely. No, I agree 100%. My life would have taken a totally different turn. I remember my girlfriend at the time, who became my wife, was like, "You're crazy. Like, what are you thinking?" Like, so I may not have ever gotten married. My kids may not have come until much later. You're right.
Yeah.
All of those things would have changed. So listen, I wouldn't go back and change it for the world. I am very, very grateful that I did have the opportunity for almost 10 years to be able to train and wrestle, and I met a lot of amazing people, a lot of people that have been and will be on the show. I actually have an appointment to get Paul on the show coming up pretty soon. And I've had a lot of great friends. Danny Devine, who's one of my closest friends, who's like the star at MPW now. So it's just been a great time. And I've met a lot of people and gotten greater opportunities through that. So, I have to ask, though, and we'll get back to some of these other things, but in the bio, you were able to discover people like Samoa Joe and John Cena. So when I first came to UPW, and when I was following UPW, like they were just getting started. I mean, I remember the Prototype. He was like a phenom, and look at him now. He just he just had a Guinness Book of World Records for granting the most wishes. Isn't that amazing, though?
So, Discover is not literally. I mean, I got Samoa Joe. I was going to see some small matches at some of the smaller federations, and I saw it, and I was helping run the school. And I remember I saw Samoa Joe, and I was like, man, this guy's got something. So I invited Joe to come down. I said, Joe, you need to come down and train with us down in Huntington Beach at Ultimate Pro Wrestling. The opportunities, because we're a farm league. I said the opportunities there are going to be great for you. Mm-hmm. And he did, right? So he's one of those guys that's always remembered that and has given me a little bit of credit for that. John Cena came to the school, so I mean, I helped him along the way, but John Cena was a guy that came and already signed up for the school, and he always had it, right? There's in the world of professional wrestling and as an acting as well, you got to be able to talk. John Cena, Samoa Joe, the Ric Flairs, the Rocks, these guys can talk. Same with any kind of businessman. If you can talk, you're a talker, right? You're not afraid to talk about anything, especially things that you love. And in our world, in the entertainment world, if you can't talk, they're going to stick you with a guy like me, who was a manager in the business for a long time. And it takes away from your business. It takes away from things, because as a performer, I want to get a little spotlight as well. I understand I'm trying to help someone out here and get them over, but I also want the spotlight. So I'm going to take my moments to shine. And if I outshine you, well, and that's, I mean, I try not that to happen, but that happens. So yeah, a lot of, John Cena, Samoa Joe, good friends of mine. In fact, Samoa Joe was so good at talking and on the cuff and be able to talk about. We did a radio show called Wrestling 101. Mm-hmm. And we did that for a year. And John Cena would come in and answer our phones and be like, "Hey, it's the Prototype." And I'm like, that's always, that's a funny thing, because people go, "John Cena, he's huge." I'm like, he used to answer my phones for me on my show. But great guys. John gives back to those kids, and on the Make-A-Wish Foundation and all that. I think he's done over 2,000, like you said. And listen, I have a wish. I want to be on The Peacemaker, that TV show, or in a couple of his movies. So, John, grant me a wish and throw a bone to your old buddy.
There you go. Throwing it out there. I love it. Hey, talk about some of the other guys and girls that you got to work with, since we're on that subject of pro
Sure.
wrestling and talking about Ultimate Pro Wrestling, the school. Um, you talked about how you got into it, but talk about some of the other workers that
Well,
you were with.
it's pro wrestling. It's an interesting thing, right? So back then when we were doing it, I believe that was probably there's so 25 years ago. We would have to do the math, but guys would come to school and you would be there for a little bit. I mean, it was not something we may, after 4 or 5 months, you may be able to come in and do a spot or two, which means come in and do a little bit in a match. But the unfortunate thing about wrestling today is guys will go to class for 3 months and then start. They're that's it. I don't need anything else, and they're out there wrestling and they're getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
We signed up a guy called Little Nate. I used to call him.
I remember
And
Little
Little
Nate.
Nate was 14 years. I don't know if do you know Nate?
I remember him for sure.
Well,
Absolutely. I followed Ultimate Pro Wrestling more than I followed WWE at the time, believe it or
so
not.
talk about a guy that had a love for the business. Of course, the Ballard brothers, who I used to manage, two of the great wrestlers in the business that understand every single thing about wrestling. Their size was a factor because that was back in the day, 20 years ago, where size mattered, right? Very few guys were Rey Mysterio size it could get a spot in the bigs, which was ECW, WCW, and the WWF at the time. And then you could wrestle in Mexico and overseas in Japan. Ballard brothers were too small, great wrestlers. Nate was really tiny, 14 years old, and he comes to class and says, I want to sign up. And I was like, how old are you? 14. And I'm like, you got to have your mom come down here. So his mom came down and said, I'll sign whatever release it is. And I'm like, you sure? Sure. He did it. That guy put in years of professional wrestling, got so good at it, would go out, do his own thing, book his own shows, wrestle all over the world, and used to go do stuff with Roddy Piper on tour. And that's one of the guys I really remember that just did great things. Because it's anything in life, right? I was a 30-year-old guy getting into the business. I maybe had one real wrestling match, and I realized I'm not going to be able to do this. But I love the business so much. I made my own spot as a manager doing color commentary. I figured a way to stay into the business because I really wanted to do something. There's nothing that, I know you talk about this a lot with your motivation stuff. There's nothing in this world, if we don't put our mind to it, we can figure it out and get it done. And I really wanted to work in the business, and I figured out how to work in the business, as a guy like Nate did, as well as guys like Samoa Joe and John Cena have done, as you have done. So you just got to put your mind to it. But yeah, the Ballard brothers were great. Navajo Warrior, right? So here's the guy, the Navajo Warrior. He's not as old as I am, but I'm 55. But he wrestled as a young guy, learned to wrestle, had worked for the WWE before, WWF, did his own promotions, and now is again working for the WWE, I believe, and and some training stuff and helping out in Arizona. And he's doing strongman competition, right?
Yeah.
He's got to be fit. He's got to be 50, right? He's got to be. I don't think he's as old as I am, but he's out there still staying motivated to be physical and do something. And I know he still wrestles once in a while. So if your passion and your heart is there, you will figure a way.
I agree with that 100%. I absolutely love that. And I've seen some of those strongman competitions that he's participated in, and following him on social media. Wow. I mean, he's a big dude and he's still working, and it's just amazing. So that's cool stuff.
He's never been that strong, right? He wasn't in that good a shape in his 20s or 30s or 40s.
So I have hope. I like it.
That's right. Yeah. So
hey guys, if you're watching here live and you have any questions for Brett Wagner, please drop your questions in the comments. Any thoughts, anything that you want to hear about, just please drop those in the comments. We'll make sure to address it. And a real quick shout out to Joy Vincione, who is always watching my podcast and watching what we do here. So I appreciate you checking in. Let me know if you have any questions for Brett. As we're, continuing to talk a little bit about the professional wrestling world, it's funny you were talking about Lil Nate. I remember him so vividly, and it made me immediately think of two young men that I had a chance to watch them start. I think I may have even been part of their first couple classes, along with Danny Devine, who helps lead the Millennium Wrestling Academy. And we have Jose Bucio and Dustin Daniels. These guys were like teenagers. Like you said, mom had to come in and sign for them to wrestle. And now you should see these guys. I mean, they're
Oh, yeah.
hot. They're hot. They're amazing. So it's just, it goes to, if you want it bad enough, and you have that passion and drive, you can really do anything you want to do. Let's talk about getting into the, how did you get into the entertainment industry? When did you start?
So I knew early on. I grew up watching. I mean, I love scary horror movies, science fiction stuff. I grew up in front of the TV. In the 70s. I was set 1977. I was 10 years old, man. So I'd get home from school and I'd be watching Starsky and Hutch. I'd be watching stuff like this, and but I really loved scary movies. Night of the Living Dead, 1967, George Romero, black and white, still scary today if you watch it. But that was stuff I watched. I remember a title of a very campy horror movie called "Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things." But 9 or 10 years old, I'm like, oh my God, this is scary. The Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, The Night Gallery, Rod Serling's Night Gallery, all this stuff I watched, and I always fantasized as a kid going, I could do that. I could be that guy. But I was also an athlete. So high school, I'd be playing football, basketball, baseball, and I was also I was a big kid, so 6'5", 280 pounds at 17 years old. I was also doing security. I'd be working some bars in Hollywood as long as I had my grades were okay, decently. I mean, C+, as long as I was passing, my dad would let me go work. So he's like, sure, I'll give you a ride to work on the weekend. I'd go work bars at 17 years old. And I'm, trying to keep a balance between keeping my grades up. All of a sudden I'm making making like $60 a night, thinking I'm rich at 17 years old, throwing people out of bars. And then having this dream of being an actor. So once high school was done and I got into college and realized that I just wasn't a college guy as far as, the sports wasn't going to be there for me. I said, okay, I'm going to figure out how to get into acting. I got into a college acting course, which is a great way to start, an improv class. And then I eventually graduated to go into a acting school in Hollywood, which is totally different. Mm-hmm. It can be a shock to a lot of people because, there's working actors in class that are already on TV, and you're this big 6'5", 280 pound flat top guy that has no idea about acting really at all, except that I had a passion for it. And I wanted to scare people in movies. And that's how I really got started. I was, if you're going to be an actor, at least back then, you needed to have your days free. So I would be bouncing and doing security at night at bars and clubs in Hollywood and downtown LA. And I had my days free. I got an agent, pretty quickly because Hollywood loves big guys, and it didn't mean I got anything everywhere. It took a couple of years before I even got my first acting gig, which was a Tostitos commercial, which I got cut out of anyways, but that got me into the union. So I got into the acting union, and it just, I always, it was unfortunate. I would love to direct, right? So I always thought I'd be a good director, but you got to go to school for that. So it's a hard balance. You got to pay your bills. You got to keep your days open. So you'll see a lot of actors or bartenders or waiters. But if that's what you want to do, you got to commit yourself. You committed yourself to martial arts and at a very early age. You committed yourself that this is you love it. This is how you make a living. This is what you do, amongst other things, Jason. But for me, it was like, well, what do I know how to do? I know how to BS. I know how to talk really well. And I know how to throw people out of clubs, right? So I had to try to keep the balance and try to work it so I didn't have to work clubs and do security for bands anymore. And it's tough, but you had to stay the course, and I stayed the course. And eventually, I'll tell you what, the wrestling also helped me, because when you're wrestling in front of 100 people or 20 people at a VFW hall, or you're doing a dark match for the WWF, managing a few guys in front of 15,000 people, you got to get them to cheer or boo you, right? So that's the whole goal. If I can get these people to boo us within, you might have 20 seconds to get them to figure out who's the bad guy and who's not, the heel or the face. When I can do that and manipulate a crowd of 20 to 15,000, when I go in for an audition in front of 5 people, it's not that hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's you grasp it a little better. So the pro wrestling helped my acting. And so by the time I was 30, I started to get a little better in the rooms when I'm auditioning. I started booking more stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the pro wrestling really helped me as far as the acting, but it took a while. I mean, it wasn't, some people get lucky. It didn't happen for me overnight. It took a good 10 years in the business from 20 to 30 before I really started getting some decent acting work and I could stop throwing people out of bars.
Well, I want to come back to that in a second. Talk about the experience as a bouncer and working in the clubs and being in Hollywood. But as far as the acting goes, and you loved horror, right? So as you're telling, you have this passion for horror and scaring people. I'm thinking of I have an uncle who loved horror movies. Every time I went over to his house, Uncle Jim, if you're watching this, here's your story, right? So he would have us sit down and watch movies all the time. Turn off the lights. We're watching Halloween 2,
Great
which
movie.
to this day still scares the shit out of me, right? I don't care where I am and I don't care how old I get. But we're sitting on the couch in the living room in the dark and we're watching it, right? And there's always the jump scares. Well, of course, he waits for the perfect time. He went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife, and as Michael was coming into the room and basically stabbing and killing someone, he would like bring the knife in front of us and like make the stabbing motion. I probably jumped out of my body, and I swear that's still probably the most scared I've ever been in my life. But he would watch that stuff, man. He would watch Night of the Living Dead, all the gory, like ripping people apart type stuff, eating people, just crazy. And he just loved it. He would just sit there and he would have a smile on his face, and I'm like, you're freaking morbid. That's crazy. That's just. But now, like after all these years, like I hated horror movies growing up, couldn't watch them. My daughter starts watching horror movies. Dad, you got to watch this one. The Conjuring and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, so we give it a try. And now, like my wife and I are constantly looking for the next scary movie to watch, right? So, what really drew you into the horror movies versus any other genre of movies?
Uh, I don't know. It's a fantasy kind of thing, right? It's like, man, I can be something else. I could be, I mean, I just love to be scared, right? So I figured if I'm scaring someone, it's like I get to be someone totally different. And being an actor is that way anyways, whether you're playing
Mm-hmm.
a lawyer, you're playing a banker, you're playing a bad guy, you're being someone else. But to add the layers, to be able to throw a mask on like this, like my Leatherface mask, which I was lucky enough to, play a part of the Leatherface in one of the movies 2003. To be
Mm-hmm.
able to do that something extra special. And I'll tell you, as a kid at like 15 to 16, I also got to work the Factory of Nightmares, which was our local junior commerce JC's. They had a haunted house. So as a kid, we would go there and get scared anyways with mom and dad would take you. And when I got old enough, they were like, oh, we can actually work here. I mean, we didn't get paid, but we got to go scare people. So that kind of helped, that just pushed it. I mean, I love, a lot of people don't like to do the makeup stuff, right? I relish in it. I love to be able to sit there in a chair. And I mean, I don't love it, but I love that once the makeup's all on, the contacts are in and you got the fangs. I'm like, it's a cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of actors won't do it. So, hey, it's just, it gives me a little bit extra, a little push in the right direction.
Right, right, right. Now, talk about your experience playing Leatherface. You showed the mask. I mean that's iconic in the horror, genre of movies. I mean, you got Michael Myers, you got Jason Voorhees, you got Leatherface. Who else is there?
So, hey, Freddy Krueger, but
Fred, there you go.
one guy really has always done that. So yeah, Leatherface was a big deal for me. I knew they were casting in 2003. I had done a little bit of horror up until then. I did some Buffy the TV show Angel, but up until the Leatherface thing, it wasn't really. I never had a major role as far as a scary guy, and they were doing So they were going to do a local hire in Texas, which I was just bummed out of, because what that would be is they would, the casting director, her favorite bar may have had a giant bouncer that worked there, and she'd go, God, you'd be great for this movie. Or some ex-Dallas Cowboy football player who blew his knee out that doesn't play anymore. Oh man, we got him. He's got a name. Let's get him. And I saw that they were looking for. They had a small role. I went to a commercial casting audition, and it said TCM on. There's different rooms. Room number 3, it said TCM, and I was like, what? I call my commercial agent. I say, ask her, the casting director, if that's for Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then ask her if they haven't cast Leatherface yet, could she put me on camera for Michael Bay? Listen, you got to take chances, right? So I was taking a chance, and they said she would love to put you on camera. I had booked something with her before. I think I did a beer commercial with them before, so she knew me, and it wasn't going out on a stretch. I went and bought that night. I went in to Salvation Army, bought some cheap suit that didn't fit me. I was already 350 pounds. I was giant. Threw this suit on, went in for the audition. They just have a lady run the camera, and the casting director said, what do you want? I said, just roll. So I said, Mr. Bay, Brett Wagner, now listen, you don't want to hire some local hire, a guy that's never been on the set before, a guy that just came off of playing football. He's a millionaire. He has no idea. I said, Leatherface was a big, meaty son of a bitch. He was brutal, killer. Don't hire some steroid guy that's never been on a set before. It's just going to ruin this role. And I went and grabbed the girl that was behind the camera, and I threw over my shoulder, which, I didn't tell her I was going to do that. And she squealed, and I said, I'll see you in Texas. And then I remember I had the girl on my shoulder, and the casting director said, is that it? I said, yeah. She's like, all right, well, put the girl down. I said, all right, put her down. I said, thanks. And, that's chance, right? Who knows? I mean, what are you really going to, how do you play Leatherface and tell somebody when the guy doesn't really talk? And Michael Bay thought I was funny, and the next day the casting director said, yeah, Michael Bay thought you were funny. You got the gig. No. 2 months later, we're filming. I'm there for a week. I get heat stroke, and I get hurt, and I get replaced. But I was Leatherface for a week. It's still an iconic thing to play. And you do get hurt in movies, and it's a part of life. It's just like anything else. You get hurt in pro wrestling, you get hurt doing martial arts. And that was a cross for me to bear. It was very tough at first to get over, but you can either dwell on that or you can move on. And I had to move on. Now I sold all my stuff in my house that was Texas Chainsaw Massacre related, which was a silly mistake because all that stuff was worth a lot of money. But, 20 years later, I've overcome that, and I relish the fact that I got to be Leatherface for a week at least, and get the first kill in the movie. And it's you just got to move on. I mean, you're going to have, this, you're going to have many disappointments in life, and you can dwell on them, and that can bring you down, and you can be in a depression for years over something. And it was time to move on. But I got to, Leatherface. A couple of years later, I was in a movie, The Crazies, which was great. I got the cover of Fangoria magazine. For us that we love horror, that's a big deal to get the cover of Fangoria magazine for the movie The Crazies. And
yeah,
I'm leaving in a couple of days to go to Tennessee to do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan film. Not playing Leatherface, but I still get to be in it. So I still get to do a lot of horror movies, and it was truly an honor to be this guy, even if it was just for a week and then the first kill of the movie. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. What a heck of like you said, just getting to do it at all is just an experience in itself and something that you can always be proud of.
And talking about motivation, right? So in life, I've always done, I said, look, I had a path. I wanted to be an actor. So I went about that way to make sure I was in the right spot, how to get my work, and how to be able to pay my bills and still work at being an actor. But as I got to 30 years old, I was like, God, I realized that I'm an entertainer. I'm not just an actor, right? So when someone comes to me and says, can you do this? I always say yes, and I will figure a way to do it. So it's like your mom and dad, they say, you throw everything up against the wall. hopefully something sticks. Some things will fall down, but a lot of stuff sticks. So I've always done everything, whether it's a radio show, whether it's coming on talking with you, whether it's going emceeing. I've done some emceeing at martial arts shows. I've done some emceeing um, uh, Black Belt Hall of Fame awards dinner. Do I
Mhm.
know all about that? No, but I know that I'm confident that I can get out there and with a little cheat sheet in front of me, I will do my best. I will put forth my best effort. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But if you do everything and try to do everything, especially in entertainment, some of these things are going to work. At least you'll learn at it. They
Mhm.
may invite you back again. I go out and I MC because I guess I'm a professional MC on the side as well. That's what I do to make a living. Drag races, car shows. I'll get on the mic because people don't. I'll come out and sign autographs as the big Schwag from Monster Garage or my drag racing show Pastime. But the promoters also don't want to get on the microphone, so they say, "Hey, can you go up there and give the awards away?" I'm like, "Sure, I can. All right, let's go do that. Can you go
Right.
do interviews for the TV and the radio?" So in anything, doesn't matter what business it is. I knew if I had a news crew and someone wanted to talk about martial arts in a school, I know that I could send them over to you and you would just say, "Sure, let's go. Let's talk about it."
Right.
So one of those things, you always got to take chances. Uh, Try not to say no on things because it might not work out for you, but you learn something, right?
That's right.
You're going to get better at it. So that's my philosophy. I'm not great at a lot of things, but I'm decent enough at enough things that I can get away with getting on the camera, get in front of people, and having a good time and having those people not be embarrassed to have me there.
Now, tell me, where did that voice, where did that, that gift of gab come from as a young child or as a teenager? I mean, were you the class clown? Were you the one that kind of got everybody's attention? Or were you kind of a shy kid that kind of learned how to develop that skill?
So I'll be honest with you. I was a tall, lanky kid, and I would in junior high. I got in elementary school and everything else. I got bullied a lot, and I got made fun of. And so when I got to start filling out and be big enough, and I don't think I bullied people myself, but I learned not to take crap, right? And
Hmm.
I probably didn't do it in the right way. But as I got older, I learned, and professional wrestling helped as well because you got to be out there yelling and screaming. And I was a big Bobby the Brain Heenan guy,
Oh yeah.
Road Warriors, of course, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair. I mean, you see these guys, and the I started doing a TV show called Pastime, a drag racing show. And we were shooting the pilot, and we have a 5-episode pilot. And I kept listening to our producer because he got an earpiece, and the president of Speed Channel, which we used to do it on, is up there. And the first 3 episodes were terrible. And I'm listening to this guy, and this guy's telling me, "You're blowing it. You're blowing it. We got 2 more episodes to do. And if this guy doesn't like them, we're not going to get this. It's done." So I said, "Well, what do I said, "I'm just going to be myself. I'm going to be the big Schwag, Brett Wagner. I'm going to talk to the camera because in pro wrestling, listen, if you can find the camera, you want to use it." And so I started talking to the camera a little bit, talking to the people at home, like pretending like, "Hey, it's me. I'm a diabetic guy. I'm overweight, but I love drag racing. I may not know everything about it, but come with me, enjoy this show." And I remember the producer was yelling at me here, going, "What are you doing?" But when those last 2 shows were done, I looked up at our boss in the booth, and he gave me the thumbs up, right?
Mm.
So I just that helped. The pro wrestling helped, and I figure in life, if you can talk, now I can tone it down. When I'm doing commercials and doing the voice for Bad Boy Mowers, sometimes they'll say, "Schwag it up, give me full Schwag, 100% Schwag," or they'll say, "Bring it down, give me Brett Wagner." So I've had to learn as I've gotten older to adapt. I've had to learn how to, fluctuate those two. I can give it over the top, the big Schwag, or I can bring it down and try to give you a
Mhm.
Brett Wagner and do that Hyundai commercial spot or that Burger King spot, or I can go big and we can do the monster truck deal. So
Right. 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 Yeah, a lot of it, a lot of what you're talking about relates to the martial arts floor, being out on the mat, teaching a 3-year-old versus teaching my teenage class, teaching a self-defense class versus teaching a traditional forms where it's going to be a little bit more technical. The voice, the tone, the energy level, the body, just all the body language too makes a really big difference in how you relay to your audience, whoever the audience may be. So I think that that's the biggest thing, is someone with a voice, whether it's on TV in a commercial, is being able to connect with
Yes.
that audience that you're reaching, right?
Now I'll tell you what. So I just was in Florida for Bad Boy Mowers. I've been with their voice of their commercials for 20 years, and I do the award show, and I totally, I'm usually up there. Whoa, here we go. And we give away the top 3 dealers, Rookie of the Year, single store, multi-store. And I was flat this weekend, right? And I get up the stage and I realized that I did a disservice to these guys as far as, so I was bummed for about an hour and a half. And then I realized, well, look at, what do? Do I let this bother me? Now, as a kid, I would have let it bother me. As a young man, in my 30s and 40s, I just blew it. But regroup. I know that next year when we do the award show, it doesn't matter. We don't have to have the streamers or banners. I'm going to make those 3 awards the biggest deal there are, because they are a big deal in our business.
Mm-hmm.
To be Rookie of the Year and you're selling 200, 300 lawnmowers, or multi-store and you're selling 1,000 lawnmowers. That's a big deal. And I didn't bring it this weekend at that point. And it bothers me. It's bothering me a little bit now, but I know that nothing I can do. It happened, and I just got to get better for the next time. So, yeah.
Talk about Monster Garage and your experience. How'd you land that? And
this is great because this comes back from Ultimate Pro Wrestling, right? So a guy named Tom Beers, THOM, Tom Beers, he created Monster Garage, Ice Road Truckers, Deadliest Catch. You name it. He has created these blue collar shows, and he did a wrestling school. It was for Discovery Channel called Wrestling School. John Cena's in it, and a whole bunch of people. And I just knew, because I want to better myself, right? I wanted to keep moving up the ladder. I wanted to be important. I wanted to make money. I wanted to make a living. I wanted to get better. And I just knew this guy, Tom Beers, from working with him on this Discovery School thing for Discovery Channel. The wrestling school thing. This is the guy. And I stayed his friend. I'd go stop by his office and I'd say, hey, Tom, hey, Schwag, what's going on? I said, I'm here if you need me. Let's go. After a couple of years, he said, hey, listen, I got a show called Monster Garage. Could you do your wrestling voice, your big Schwag voice, for the intro, outro, and then the challenge at the end? And I said, yeah. Do I get paid? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, let's go. I would have done it for free at that point. But we started going. The show was such a big hit. And I didn't, this is full Schwag. I mean, this is full Monster Garage. This is full pro wrestling, and we're pumping up Jesse James and all this stuff. And show was such a big hit. And this is also how I started traveling, right? At that point, I had never gone out and said, hey, this is the big Schwag. Would you hire me for your show? But I used to test the waters. I'd call car shows and say, hey, I see, if I saw a car show that had, it's been around for 5 or 6 years, I would say, listen, you bring out celebrities. Well, not really. I said, well, I'm the big Schwag from a TV show, Monster Garage, and I don't know who you are. I said, do you got kids? And he goes, yeah. I said, ask your kid if he knows who I am. And he goes, oh, it's the guy, it's the voice. That's the guy on Monster Garage with Jesse James. And he goes, all right, what do you want? I said, well, how about, you give me $1,000 and a flight and a room, and I'll come out and MC anything you want, and I'll sign pictures for free. And so it started happening, but I made it happen, right? But the Monster Garage helped me do that, which made me more in demand for going out and making appearances. And the first 5 years of Monster Garage were so cool. I'd never hosted anything at that point. When Jesse had his appendix burst or there was something else, not Discovery Channel, but Tom Beers and them would call me and say, Schwag, yeah, are you ready? I'm like, ready for what? He goes, well, Jesse's hurt. I need to go finish filming the show and you're going to be the host. And I was like, oh, of course I'm ready. I mean, I'm I'm having a conniption fit at home, going, "Oh my god, what am I going to do here?" But you take that nervous energy, you bring it in, and you do your best. And I was lucky enough to, over the course of those first 5 years, 3 or 4 times, I got to get on camera, and I never said no. And it helped me when I want to go out and make appearances, because now it's not just the voice. They've seen me host, they've seen me on TV. And, to this day, I still go out as the big Schwag from Monster Garage. And people, I grew up on your voice. I grew up, and a lot of people will do, can you do my message on my answering machine? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go.
Nice.
So yeah, it was a blessing. It helped me a lot. It got me, it gets me to a lot of places. It also got me to get the chance to host that drag racing show Pastime, which was great. And I did that for 5 or 6 years, a ton of shows. So you just got to keep the ball rolling, right? I wish in retrospect, I would have finished college, and I still could. I guess I could go back to college now and finish something. I wish I would have learned a trade, right? My trade is BSing. I would have loved to have learned to work with my hands, do something, have something else in the wheel well, because they say you always need something to fall back on. It's good to have something to fall back on. Believe me, it is. But you just keep plugging along, and you keep doing the best. And I married very smart, so I have a very smart wife, so she helps. And but yeah,
that's half the battle. That's half the success in life, right there. Marrying the right woman, I can tell you for sure.
Yeah.
Hey, where did the big Schwag come from? Where was that name born? Who named you that? Was that something you came up with? Tell me the story.
So I work in a bar. I was working many bars, but I worked with this guy, Australian Tom, in Hollywood. And when I was 20 to 30 years old, I was working bars with him. And my last name's Wagner, so he used to call me Schwagner. Hey, Schwagner, you coming to work on time? Let's go. And then when I got the opportunity to do the pro wrestling at Ultimate Pro Wrestling, when I got the opportunity to, it was pro wrestling. When I got the opportunity to do the wrestling, call myself. I said, I don't know. I'll call myself Schwag. I'll call myself the Big Schwag. So we started doing that. And then when Monster Garage came about, he was like, I said, can I brand it? I tried to brand it, right? I'm like, well, I'm known as the Big Schwag in the pro wrestling world. Can we do it with Monster Garage? And Tom Beers was like, I don't care. If Discovery Channel says no, then we'll figure it out. But they never said no. So then it was the Big Schwag from Monster Garage. And it kind of stuck. I remember when I got my show Pastime, and the guy was like, I think the name's dumb. We just want to go with Brett Wagner. My mom was very happy. She was like, oh, good. We get to finally Brett Wagner. But people would come up to the line and go, hey, Big Schwag. And then my producer would be like, oh, God, maybe we should just change your name back to Big Schwag. And I'm like, it's too late. It's fine. If they come up and say it, I'll make a joke and say, shh, don't tell anybody my aliases. But it was just as simple as that.
Wow.
I just tried to brand it, and today it still works. I keep doing it, and it'll probably be on my gravestone.
Well, it's funny. I get asked all the time, is Flame your actual last name? And I'm like, it is. It's on my birth certificate. That was the name I was born with. That's so cool. How'd you get that? I didn't pick it. I was born with it. So I just got a really good one. But hey, I neglected to throw these comments up there. We got a Facebook user that's watching. I apologize. You might be in one of the groups that this is streaming in. So it's not showing your name, but hello to you. And thank you for agreeing that the right woman does make all the difference in the world.
That's probably 100%. My wife, and we don't even know it. She's probably in the other room. It's probably, I got married late. So I didn't get married until... So we've been together about 10 years, and I'm 55. So I think I got married at 48 years old. I met my wife about 45 when I was 45. And do I suggest that people go out and get married to their first love? I don't know if that works anymore, but I was at the point in my life that I needed something to be stable. I travel so much to make money, to make ends meet. And I'm on right now. I've just spent I have I'll be on 7 weekends. I'll be gone by the time November 1st comes around. But hey, that's what I do. This is how I make a living, and my wife's okay with that, And if I know you run businesses. You're working sometimes 20 hours a day. You probably don't get home all the time, and if we don't have somebody, if your significant other is not backing you up on that stuff and going, it's okay, it makes life rough. And then you can do it on your own. And I did it on my own for many years, and the dating and all that. And it gets tiresome. And so when I finally met somebody, I proposed to my wife in 6 months of dating her. I just knew. I said, listen, I want to marry you. I couldn't even get down on one knee. My legs and my back are so shot from taking chair shots over the years that I was like, okay. And, and I never looked back. And I've been very blessed. So
good for you. Congratulations. That's amazing. And that Facebook user is a good friend of mine, Daniel Groff, who is
Daniel
watching.
Groff, the Groffinator.
The Groffinator, Daniel Groff. I'll have to introduce you sometime. He's right here in town. Very good friend of mine. And so thanks for watching, Daniel. Appreciate you. And you talking about wives. God was good to me because I met my wife when we were 17 and 18 years old, and we've been together ever since. So yeah, it can work. It does work. And the businesses that we run together in the martial arts school would not be the same without her. And I agree 100%. I've had lots of friends who have a business or have something that they do, and maybe they don't have the buy-in from their wife or significant other, and that just makes it really challenging. So I wouldn't know what that's like because I'm so blessed and so fortunate that I have someone that's supportive in every way possible along the line, and I hope that I do just the same for her and everything that she does.
Rumor has it she's happy with you.
I think so. She stayed with me, so I think we're okay. Well, listen, I wanted to go back and ask because we got, not off topic, but we just kind of moved on to other things. But I wanted to ask about, working in Hollywood, working the clubs, doing the, bouncing and stuff. Because that's, I have with martial arts friends, we have a lot of friends who talk about their years of being able to practice some of their martial arts in the clubs. What was your experience like? What you mentioned a couple of the clubs you worked at, and you don't have to mention names of the clubs. But what was that whole experience like? And did you meet a lot of people through doing that too?
Sure. So maybe I don't know if people know martial arts, since I know, but Paulo Tocha from Bloodsport. So I used to work with a lot of guys that work in clubs and stuff, and that are martial artists. And yeah, you meet a lot of celebrities. I worked at some big places, Jones Hollywood, which is a restaurant bar and very famous. And, you got a lot of celebrities that come in, and it's sometimes usually it's a blessing sometimes because they might give you some work and say, man, a friend of mine at the time, James Gandolfini, we did a movie when I was just starting out, right before True Romance came out, and I did this small movie with James Gandolfini, and I think True Romance had just come out. And I remember the casting director goes, "Oh, you get to do scenes with this guy James Gandolfini," and I'm like, "I don't even know who he is." And he was telling me, "Did you watch True Romance?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, oh that guy stole the show," And so Hollywood's an interesting place, when you're working the bars doing security, you'll see these people, especially if you work in the cool place, and if they come in, and some of them are the nicest people in the world, and some of them are so entitled that sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for when you meet these guys, because I was like big fans of people, and then I have to throw them out of a bar. I will tell you, here's a funny story. Honey, what's the Wonder Years kid I threw out of a bar? My wife's in the other room. No, Wonder Years.
Jason Hervey or Fred Savage?
Fred Savage. So, thank you, buddy. So Fred Savage comes into Jones, and I know he's underage, right? And he's like 20 years old, I think. And I'm like, I said, not a big deal. Oh, hey, how you doing, Mr. Savage? Oh, great. I got a party at the bar. Yeah, come on in. We serve food, so we're allowed to have underage kids in there. And I remember I said, hey, don't be getting drunk on me and get me in trouble. So he was drinking, and the bartender's like, is Fred Savage of age? And then I came in and said, Fred, come on, don't be drinking. Just keep it mellow. After the third time going in, I had to toss him out. I'm like, Fred, you got to go. What? I'm like, you got to go. He wasn't a pain in the butt, but I just can't have a underage kid drinking at the bar. 20 years later, right? Fred is a big director, right? That's what he does. Tremendous actor back when he was a kid. Now he's a top-notch director. I go in for an audition for Nickelodeon or it was something for ABC Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, this is our director, Fred Savage." And I'm like, "Oh my God," and I'm like, I don't know if he remembers me or not, but I hope he doesn't remember. And I had a terrible audition, right? I was just terrible. When they say thank you and no one's looking at you and they're all chit chatting. So again, I'm one of those guys that'll take a chance. So I said, "Hey, Mr. Savage," now the whole room looks at the casting director's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" Don't say nothing. I said, "Do you remember me?" And he goes, "No." "Did we work before?" I said, "No, I threw you out of Jones." And everybody's like, and he goes, "You threw me out of Jones?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Was I an asshole?" I said, "Well, you were a little drunk." And everybody's like, "What did you just committed career suicide?" He started laughing so much. He goes, "Let me apologize now to you." I'm like, "No, it wasn't that big a deal. I just knew you were 20 and you were having a couple drinks." And he's laughing. And the casting director's like, "Oh my God, I think you just ruined yourself in Hollywood." Hour later, my agent calls and says, "I don't know what you did, but you just booked that Fred Savage thing."
Oh, wow.
I go to the set and they're like, "Are you the one that threw Fred Savage out of the bar?" And I'm like, "What did he just tell everybody?" But he thought it was so cool. He was such a nice guy. And I got hired out of there for being honest, which normally wouldn't work. But yeah, I met a lot of great people over the years, 20 years plus working the bars. I will still once in a while go fill in at Jones. I don't like it, but every year, once or twice, one of the other doormen who's an actor there or something that's still there over the years that used to cover for me when I got an acting gig, he'll say, "Listen," or they'll call and say, "I got nobody for Christmas."
Mm-hmm.
Christmas Eve or something. If my wife doesn't mind, I'll go sit down there at the door and let people in I mean, do I like doing it? No, but do I understand that good karma, will come back and hopefully help me? And I don't mind seeing some of the people because I worked with some of these people for off and on for 20 years. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I've worked with some tremendous martial artists, at some of these clubs and working bars that for me, when I was giant at 350 pounds, for me to move somebody out of the way wasn't a big deal. But as we get a little older, I really don't want to lay hands on somebody. But when you work with some of these guys that I've worked with that know how to lay hands on somebody, I'll say, "Listen, you don't have to worry about me, but this guy over here, this 5'10" guy that's about to really put the boots down, he may kick you upside the head or put you to sleep in a couple seconds. I don't worry about me, worry about them." And I would always try to use humor to diffuse a situation because last thing I want to do is put my hands on somebody and hurt them or get myself hurt. So that's the one thing that the best offense is a good defense, and if you can talk your way out of something, it's even better.
Well, it seems like talking has been your thing, and talking you has gotten you into and probably out of a lot of things in your life. So I appreciate you being on the show and just kind of sharing a lot of stories today. I hope everybody watching has enjoyed this and enjoyed it enough that you'll share it and let everybody know about the Master Motivation podcast. Please subscribe to the channel and check out our over 100 interviews that we've completed so far and over 100 more to go at least. I've got all of 2023 booked out and ready to go, but I'm starting to fit in more and more people on our Wednesday show, like Brett here today. So, guys, thanks for tuning in. And Brett, hang out for just a couple minutes, and we'll have a quick debrief. But thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next Monday. Thanks again, Brett.
Thanks, bro.